I always knew I was going to be involved in creative work. It was definitely the subject at school I excelled at. So all my grandparents were quite creative, and so I sort of grew up making and crocheting and knitting. So it was a sort of a natural language. Textiles revealed itself to me through that sort of process. I call it ceramic patchwork because it's a variation of a traditional textile process. But rather than working around sort of paper templates, which is what you would normally do, I'm working around broken pieces of ceramic. So I find ready-made ceramic forms, I break them into lots of pieces, I wrap each piece with silk, and then I stitch them back together again. Quite often people assume there must be glue somewhere along the line, but there isn't any at all. The crossing stitches that you see in my work is what's holding the fabric around that particular piece of ceramic. And then the little stitches I do from the outside join one fragment to another. If I took a pair of scissors to the sort of crisscrossing stitches that you see and snipped through them all, everything would sort of tumble out. I look for the thickness of the ceramic. I don't like to necessarily work with things that are too thick because the strength in the actual piece eventually is just going to be purely the stitch. So there is this balance to be had with the weight of the actual vessel. So I don't want things that are too heavy. And I'm wanting things that are really beautiful and really elegant. Overall, the main thing I look for is the silhouette, because ultimately whatever pattern was on the vase initially gets completely covered up. For the fabrics, I definitely respond to colour. That's one of the initial things I look for. I'm always drawn to fabrics that have got quite an oriental aesthetic to them. The more I've been doing it, I'm better able now to choose particular pattern qualities that will, when they're cut up and reassembled back on themselves, become more interesting. The design, when it's broken up into these fragmented pieces and patched back on themselves, the pattern works in a quite a different way. But I'm better able now to assess that in a scarf and see the potential of that. When I'm rummaging through second-hand shops or car boot sales or vintage stores, I go with my gut reaction. Having broken the piece, you're faced with this sort of you versus the piece challenge. How's it going to look when it's recreated? It's almost a little bit like the urge of when you begin a jigsaw puzzle. You sort of know where you're ending up, but realisation of what it actually is going to look like, you won't know until you get there. So there is that sort of journey. Because no two pieces are ever the same, I'm constantly responding to the piece as it's developing and as it's building. When people first see my work, quite often they think it is ceramic and some sort of strange glaze that they've not seen before. So there is a sort of slight confusion in people's minds as when they first see it. And then when people actually understand that it's textile, when people then pick it up, there's a surprise with my work because quite often it flexes. When they pick it up and not expecting it to feel warm to the touch, they're sort of expecting it to be a much more cool sensation. I love the idea of the journeys that things go on, and hopefully they've been treasures for lots of people along the way, not because they were necessarily new or pristine, but maybe because of association. Hopefully I enable it to go further, move forward and have a new lease of life. I like the idea that its perceived value has gone up and down and has these dips and moments. But, things that I found in my local charity shop one week, later down the line, I'm exhibiting at galleries and shows. It's this lovely sort of rags to riches story.